Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, the devil has found his way to Riverdale, which, honestly, like, Veronica scoffed at it, but I actually like the whole Cypher thing of, like, Cypher, Lucifer. I'm like, I was like, it's like, oh, like, you must be an idiot not to have figured it out. I didn't. It didn't even cross my mind. I was like, oh, Cypher, that's cool. Like, I'm the dork I am. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty slick. It's nothing too impressive, but I don't know why. I liked it for whatever reason. I like play on words. I just think that's dope. But nevertheless, the initial reason to come to town, well, he's got a couple names on his list, but the first and foremost, he came here for Pop Tate's soul, because Pop's dad sold his soul so that the business would be a success. Pops had no idea about that until sometime later, and so he ended up selling his soul just so that his father would be able to get out of hell, which this is an interesting timing just because I'm watching Hellbound right now. I still need to watch the season finale, but that's so interesting to me that it's like, I'm just happen to watch something else that's related to burning in hell, and we got this now too. But nevertheless, what I also thought was interesting too is like, the fact is, Cheryl had nothing to do with this episode. I thought that was kind of interesting. You would think with just her side of things that there would be some dabbling into this, but I guess not. Because it's interesting, because you kind of went after Veronica, you went after Betty, and you went after Jughead, so, like, you're hitting some of the core, like, at least Jughead and Betty, it makes sense, because also, like, they're core family members of Riverdale's founding and stuff like that. So, like, it makes sense kind of to some extent. Obviously, what Pops represents to the entirety of Riverdale. But I just think it's interesting. And Veronica, it actually makes sense to an extent, considering, like, what the lodges are all about. But kind of, circling back to it and just kind of going with the flow of things. Tabitha can save her grandfather's soul, but it won't just cost her soul. She'll have to sell Pops to do it. And it's like, why is that? Though Pop eventually tells her not to do it because of what Pops represents for Riverdale. And it applies to Riverdale too. It's a place for people who are lost and no place else to go. It's a place for people looking for refuge, and that's important in a place like this. And that's why the devil wants it so badly, because it's like a little spark of hope in the darkness, and so you want to crush that. So, and like I said, at the same time, like, you have Veronica and Reggie. They're opening up their casino. And Alice doing what she does, she immediately trashes it, being like, oh, the core of sin and what it'll bring and what it will destroy the very values that is Riverdale. I think it's actually interesting because I kind of let that slip my mind. It's like, right, Alice that's always been a part of Alice's character since the beginning of, like, really kind of being like the righteous one to shut down anything she seems deplorable, and like in that regard of, like, I forgot, because it kind of seemed to me, it seemed like it came out of nowhere, but I feel like, maybe this is just me. I feel like they haven't used that angle of Alice's type of, like, who she is, kind of that holier than thou type of thing. Like, they haven't really used that since, like, earlier parts of the series. Like, that part of her is kind of, considering everything going down and kind of her darker sides kind of, like, poking out, I think they finally like, this was kind of returned to form to somewhat extent for Alice, but I think it's just because of all the darkness she's had to suffer in her life. I think that kind of led to all of this playing out the way it. I think that's kind of what that's supposed to be. I even love Veronica being like, "Oh, Alice, welcome to one." I'm like, once again, I love the play on words. I'm a simple man. I enjoy the small things in life. But at the same time, she's dealing with the fact is that Mr. Cypher's here to win and stuff like that, and he's racking up quite the win, and it's like, no, because I love that at the same time Veronica was telling, like, Alice, like, hey, everything's super legit. Reggie's explaining to everyone at the business, this is super not legit. It's like we're skimming off the top, we're paying off the right people so that everyone looks the other way. So I love, it's just shady operation. So Alice has her reasons. She has every right to be like, oh, this isn't what you pretend it to be. But the point is, if they could get Alice on their side, they could, like, get the publicity for the casino back up instead of having her basically tearing it down in the public eye like she is. But Mr. Cypher is here for one thing, and that's Reggie's soul, because Reggie offered his soul in exchange for things to kind of work out. And so Veronica's going to do everything she can to save Reggie, so she ends up offering Nick. Oh, like, Nick, you brought back in a story just for you to burn in hell. Once again, every time you've ever popped up, you've been a complete and other human garbage. Once again, nothing against the actor who plays the character. It's like you're just playing the character that was written for you, and you're just like, right, I'm just playing a scumbag of a dude. And he just, like, revels in it, because, like, Veronica's like, dude, tell me all the terrible things you've done, and oh my god, it gets me so hot and bothered. And he does it. He's like, oh, I did this, oh, I've done that. 3 or so hit and runs. It's like, God, like, you are such a garbage human being, because you're like, yeah, Veronica likes bad boys, so I'm sure that I'm like the scum of the human race type of situation. So he gets gone. It's like, cool. Not a hair off of Reggie's head will be touched. My immediate thought was, and it's not just Reggie's soul up for grabs, it's yours too, because that was actually the bargain. No. Reggie's soul was never on a platter. Hers was the entire time. I'm like, Reggie, you piece of crap. Which is so interesting, because, like, right, the whole sacrificing Archie thing was supposed to make it so that you were both good. But then, like, he had everything with his car last episode, so I wondered, did that play any role? Because once again, it's like, at certain points, I'm like, oh, it feels like these are continuations of each other in certain story aspects, but then it also seems like they just negate other elements, because it's like, they just kind of, because I was like, that's why I'm like, did that midlife crisis kind of change things, and just like that solidify, or did he, I'm curious, was he already in that position when the devil like approached him? Maybe that's why he was having that midlife crisis, feeling kind of bad. But then it's like, right, with the car and everything, and that projection of the teacher that he get, like, maybe that was all kind of the devil sweetening the deal to be like, yeah, give me this, and give me Veronica's soul, and this is all yours. So yeah, Reggie is a piece of crap for doing that, because at the very least you could have been like, honestly, I kind of sold your soul. Yeah, she'd be pissed at you, but she went through the trouble of saving your soul, because it turns out he didn't want Reggie's soul to begin with, because it's just, oh, puny and pathetic and poultry, and it's like, I don't want it. And she's like, of course he wouldn't, you're just terrible, should just get out of my sight. Because he was like, if anyone could figure it out, I figured you. Because I love that he was like, if anyone's going to beat the devil, it's going to be you. I mean, the devil's been beaten before, but granted, this is a different devil than the one from Chilling Adventures, obviously. But still, I think it's so fascinating that it's like, right, if anyone's going to beat him, it's going to be you, Veronica, because you've got the mind of a lodge, and the lodges always get things to go their way. So she decides to put on a performance. At first, when it was like all these, and like the people that they owe money to, that I thought she was going to try and sell their souls to the devil, but it's like, yeah, her soul is always going to be the prized possession, because I think it's just being a lodge and everything. It's like, oh, getting your soul is like, oh, it's going to be icing on the cake, because I guess he just knew like things were going to work out. So Veronica puts on the performance of her lifetime, which is interesting, because Kevin like got what he wanted, which included like, oh, you'll get on Broadway, you get all this fame and fortune. He didn't bother reading the contract, which I'm like, when it comes to the devil, you always read the contract. But he also gets Finn, who's Fangs. And it's like, yeah, we just like, I'm your boyfriend and your manager, and we also like go upstairs and have sex. He's like, okay, right, and just kind of accepts it as it is. But when Veronica was doing her thing at the end and Finn was kind of enjoying, you see Kevin kind of giving her the side eye, like, no. This is supposed to be my time to shine. She's upstaging me a bit. Yes, I've still got my deals in place, but still, I don't want this to jeopardize it. Because I almost wondered if Veronica doing what she was doing was actually going to somehow impede what Kevin like had going on, you know? That's what I was wondering. I thought that was, but it turns out not to be the case. It seemed like Kevin seemed like I guess that was also the point. His was a done. It's like, oh, because literally everyone else's story except for Kevin's, you come back to, because like Kevin's is like a sure done deal. It's like, yep, I win. Like, no, not everyone else's was that, you know? But Veronica, like Reggie's like, oh, Veronica, you won. She's like, yep, I'm still here because I offered the devil a sweeter deal. The fact is, every week we're going to give him some lost soul that comes into the casino. He's like, oh, I knew you'd come up. I knew you'd figure a way out of it. She's like, of course, and kisses him. And then a knock comes out the door. He's like, what's that? Who's that? She's like, you know exactly who it is, Reggie. She's like, you should have never betrayed me. Now go and do it. Go accept it like a man. Or he'll pull you out here screaming like a little bitch. I'm like, this show loves using that turtle phrase, specifically little bitch. I don't know what it is. Like, I guess it's just like the most demeaning thing that the show could actually say. But I just, like, that's been used a couple times in the show, which I think is just so fascinating. But aside from that, like, Reggie gets burned at the end. You're like, kind of feel bad for him. I mean, to be fair, he did screw over Veronica, and the Lodges don't do well with the whole being screwed over thing. They are vengeful, and they will find their way out of anything. That's even the kind of point that Jughead makes at the end of just like, yeah, that's what the Lodges do. They go from whatever deal to whatever deal they can make to kind of keep going. Like, it's do or die. It's kill or be killed when it comes to the Lodges. Sad thing is, she's gotten a lot of that. I mean, truth be told, it's from both of her parents, but the more evil version of that comes from her dad. Hermione has it to some extent, but, like, that mainly comes from her dad, that do-or-die bloodthirst. And it's like, probably like the devil's like, well, I'll probably catch up to your dad eventually, so I don't have to worry about him, but you're here in Riverdale, so I'm coming for your soul specifically, because you're the next best soul in comparison to his, maybe, type of thing. I don't know. I just think that's fascinating, but other than that, we had Jughead, which I love that, like, Jughead and Tabitha's stories are so separate, because Jughead, like, was going to interview the devil for his own purposes. He's like, oh, I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions, and it seemed like you weren't asking for Tabitha's sake, you were just asking for your own, you know, because you were trying to spin a deal of your own. He was like, I'm not going to offer my soul or anything. It's like, no. The devil's like, I will give you fame and fortune. Oh, you'll be able to, like, air my interview, and you'll publish, you'll get all this fame and fortune, but afterwards, you'll never be able to write anything again. Or you could keep this interview, but we could do this interview, but you can never publish it, and you'll be able to keep writing, but there's no guarantee you'll ever be able to, like, write your next hit or whatever. Which Jughead was like, right after the interview, I'll decide what I'll do with it. Now, I'm curious, like, he was like, this is everything. This is my story. This is the mysteries of the universe. I'm like, what did he tell him? I wonder if it's stuff that we kind of know from Supernatural or the show Lucifer, or just, like, the truth. Because, you know, from those things, we get the truth, like from, like, Lucifer or something like that, the TV show, you get, like, oh, the Bible's got its interpretations of things. This is, like, really what was happening. This is really what it was. So, that plus the mysteries of the universe. And Jughead's like, I got to publish this. All right. A deal struck, and he's able to publish it, and he gets all the attention. Even your boy Sam calls him up like, I know I fired you and I got rid of you as my client, I apologize, take me back as your agent. All I gotta say is, what's your next thing? And it's like, right, the devil said I wouldn't be able to write anything. And I love that even Jughead tries it out. He's like, who knew that the devil was so literal? Because it's not like, oh, you won't have the creativity. It's like anytime you try to write something, it comes out as literal gibberish. And I'm like, that's fascinating. And Jughead was like, no, please, take it back. Like, I'll give you my soul. Just do this for me. I just need to make sure I'm able to write again. I'm nothing without being a writer. Like, Jesus. I mean, it's always been a core aspect of himself. Like, that's always been his outlet. Like, if he does that, have that, then I'm curious, like, how does that translate to other things? If you can't literally write, but, you know, writing is that's his form of it. So I was like, it could become like a podcaster, but, like, would your words become jumbled too? Because, like, in that form, like, it's you trying to tell a story, you can't, like, that's why I'm curious, like, how far that not being able to write would be able to stretch. But, yeah. But the moment he was, like, willing to sign the contract, I was like, you're not going to read over it? Because I immediately thought, like, oh, man, they're going to use Jughead to get to Tabitha and Pops. It's like, no, he's already gotten it towards Tabitha, so I thought he had a contingency plan, but I guess that's supposed to be the devil's undoing. Is like, he always knows, like, oh, the house always wins, so he knew, like, oh, I'll get it in the end, so it don't matter. So he didn't even bother using Jughead as a backdoor to making sure that all happens. So there's that. Then there's Betty's side of things, where she gets visited. Well, Glenn calls her up and is like, yo, we want to send TBK, which I was immediately like, that's interesting, because I was assuming you'd save that for, like, Riverdale stuff and not just Riverdale. I'm like, okay, we'll see how it plays out in Riverdale. And, you know, because I know that's going to be, like, a main part of, it has to be, like, a main part of Betty's story, because he contacted her last season, and, like, that is not resolved. That's still, like, needs to be dealt with. But Glenn's like, yeah, TBK only wants to talk to you, but you know, she wants to talk to TBK because she wants to believe, like, is there true unadulterated, like, evil? Like, does evil 100% exist? And he's like, oh yes, true evil does exist, and it does exist in you. It's part of you, but that part of you that's evil is 100% evil. And obviously she calls up Glenn and is like, no, I can't do this. He's messing with my TBK. TBK hasn't been sent to you. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, what's going on here? And he's like, right, it's the devil messing with her. Because I did think it was interesting. It's like, oh, don't you want me to take off my mask? But she's like, no, we'll get to that soon enough. Because I guess she was just so, like, she just, you know, because they needed a confession out of him was kind of the whole point. But for him, he presented himself as, hey, I'm the devil. And she's like, oh, really? You're the devil? Not believing him until he was like, all right, your dad's in hell. She's like, fine, let me talk to you. And he's like, oh, Betty, help me. I'm in so much pain. I'm like, do you think she'd really care considering you were the serial killer that you were? To be fair, even when you died, she was sad because that was a complicated thing. Despite everything, you were her dad. So it's kind of like he is kind of where he's supposed to be considering he was the serial killer that he was. But, you know, it's like he was able to verify who he was because she's like, right, if you are the devil, if you took me all these places, and it's like, yep, he knew exactly the location she was referencing. And he's like, oh, like, if you're not going to do it for your father, do it for your sister. It's like, no. Why would Polly be in hell? It's like, oh, doesn't she have right to be in hell? And it's like, what evil did Polly necessarily do to end up in hell? But the whole point was just to mess with her. It's like, what is the devil supposed to be? The king of lies, which Lucifer from the show Lucifer would be like, shut up. No, I'm not the king of lies. In fact, I only tell the truth, you know? So that's always going to be the interesting thing going forward with that whole, like, oh, king of lies thing. But regardless, he manipulates her and he pushes her to the point she stabs him repeatedly. And I even love that she was like, what's it going to be? Is the devil actually me? I love that she thought, like, she saw, I mean, to be fair, they've already kind of done that when it came to the farm and Polly, like, you were in such a haze and manipulated, you thought Polly was you. Like, you know, that was the whole point, to make you feel like you were facing your darker instincts. And the moment she cuts off the mask, I was like, who is it going to be? I was like, is it going to be, and it turns out to be Glenn, which I think that's supposed to be a thing in itself, because once again, I could be 100% wrong. I've just always felt like Glenn was actually TBK, but maybe that isn't the case. But it turns out in this case, it's like, wait, Glenn? It's like, oh yeah, like, I pretended to be you and got Glenn here. It's been Glenn the entire time. So you thought you were talking to Glenn? It's interesting how that worked out, because, like, they cut that together because designed in a way and edited in a way to make it seem like they were having that conversation at the same time. It was like mixed matching conversations because, I mean, it's meant to throw off the audience as well. But I'm assuming that when we saw Glenn talking on the phone, that was supposed to be earlier when he was talking to Betty, and Betty talking to him was, you know, her actually talking to the devil both times type of thing. I think that's what that's supposed to be. But it's like, yeah, because he wants Betty, because he brings up the fact is that Riverdale is going to be home to the ultimate battle between good and evil, or at least like one of the focal points of it. Since we are going kind of by, like, you know, the Greenvale equivalency, which is in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, well, it obviously exists in this universe too, it's just a different Greenvale. We already kind of had that to some extent, those battles of good versus evil type of situations and conversations in that show. Now we're kind of getting them here, and he wants basically Betty to be like the seed of destruction. Essentially, he wants her to be his, as she says, like the equivalency of like the Whore of Babylon type of situation. So I think that was fascinating, which she was like, I'm not going to be that. Well, that was before she killed Glenn, and now she ended up having to bury his body beneath her floorboards and stuff like that, and she has to cover up the fact that, no, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time you've had to cover up some dead bodies type of situation, right? So, you know, now it's like, right, this is a good guy who was not deserving of this, so, you know, so that changes things a little bit in the conversation. I did skip over it, because speaking of Betty, I didn't talk about it, but initially Veronica was supposed to hand over Alice's soul, but didn't, because she's like, despite you being a pain in the ass, Alice, you don't deserve to burn in hell, which Alice was like, no, I'm gonna come after you, which she has every right to now, considering like what Veronica's going to be doing going forward, like selling souls to the devil. But kind of like to circle this all around to the conclusion of the Tabitha thing, which I think is so interesting. She got, because of the whole like helping people out and Pops being what it is, it's like, yo, he's like, yeah, my boss, and he looks up and is like, likes what you guys are doing. That actor, I've seen him in something recently. I just don't remember what it was. I was looking at something that he popped up in. The actor who plays Raphael, I was like, I know you from something. I just can't remember what it was I've seen you in. It was super recent too, and I just can't place it. I'll probably have to look into it afterwards. But he ended up being like, yeah, this place is going to be important for the battle versus good versus evil. So Tabitha and Pops set a trap for the devil. Basically, Virgin Mary's tears were added to a milkshake, and the devil starts spewing up all this like black goo, and it's like, yeah, get out of here. Like, Pops is protected now. Not sanctified, consecrated ground now. So get out of our town. Like, they were able to deal with him, but that didn't get rid of everyone else's circumstances. It's not unless the stories are kind of told out of order, and that's the last thing. But I think, like, he's all over the place. He's bouncing between everyone because he can kind of be everywhere all at once. So the point, I think, is just like, right, they are the only ones who came out on top. You know, everyone else ended up selling their souls and kind of got the rough end of the deals. He just couldn't get to them. So that begs the question, though, like, will this battle of good versus evil continue into the next episode? Like I said, it's like, it seems like an anthology, but it does seem like there is still a through line of it being connected. I keep flip-flopping on it because I'm not sure. Probably won't fully know until the end of the event, like until like the 5th episode to really clarify it. I saw something in the preview for the 4th episode. Won't talk about it in case you're someone that wants to avoid the previews. I only watched like a quick second of it, but it's like, okay, so we're finally getting the thing that I've been anticipating. I was wondering whether that, I was kind of assuming that was going to be part 5, but it seems like it's going to be in part 4, not unless it carries over into part 5. Either way, I'm excited to see where this Riverdale situation takes us going forward into the next episode / part. I said that weird. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.